We're going to start right away. As you know, we have a packed program for today. But it's my pleasure to welcome Ambassador Majed Al-Suwaidi. I've covered some of your work while you were here at the United Nations. And you're now the Director General and Special Representative of the UAE to the COP28, anticipated on November 30th until December 12th. To his right, we are glad to have with us Dr. Abdullah Muqsit. He is the Secretary of the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. He flew from Geneva to be with us, so we are thankful and grateful to have you with us, Doctor. You know, I've been a journalist for decades covering the Middle East, and what I've normally covered is threats from militants, extremist organizations, wars, conflicts. But we are all waking up together, I think, to a new threat. Looking just at what happened in Derna, the catastrophe over the last week with nearly 12,000 people that died from the floods, the drought in Iraq, extreme weather patterns, whether we're looking at the wildfires in Turkey, in Lebanon, in Egypt. Just a question to you both. I'm going to start with you, Ambassador. How do you assess the threat of climate change today in the Middle East?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me in this very, very important conversation. And as you've said, our region is one of the first regions that will be impacted by rising global temperatures. We're already used to very warm climates, and that's only going to get more difficult. You mentioned the floods in Libya, and this is a terrible thing that our hearts go out to the people there and the suffering they've been through. I also was recently in Nairobi in Kenya and had the fortune, if you want to call it that, to go with UNHCR to visit a refugee camp. And while we were there, we visited with 3 different groups. One were the local Kenyans who were impacted by climate change themselves and impacted by this influx of migrants at the Dadaab refugee camp that we went to visit. A camp that, by the way, we think of sometimes as refugee camps as like a few thousand people, but this is 300,000 people who are living in this refugee camp. And then we also spoke with a group of women and young ladies in particular who spoke of their plight in simple sanitation and access to water. And then I spoke to a lady who had 9 children, was pregnant. She had to move because of drought, had impacted her crops, her livestock. She'd been driven to this camp because she wanted to simply find water and food for her children and an education and perhaps a glimmer of a hope for a future. And the fact of the matter is as global temperature rises, we're only going to see more people in these vulnerable situations. And we need to start to think about how we address that. And we need to start to think about the serious actions that we do that help those people in those vulnerable situations. But also, moreover, increasingly, we are being impacted by climate change. We've seen droughts and floods in Europe, wildfires that are impacting. Here in New York City, I think I saw pictures from some of my friends who live here of smoke from fires in Canada. Increasingly, we are all seeing the impacts of climate change, and that means that we need to do something about it, and we need to do something about it quickly because we are 7 years away from 2030, 7 years away from the goals that were set by the Paris Agreement, and we have to get back on track because we know from the recent GST, Global Stocktake report, that we're way off track. And what are we going to do to get back on there? And our friends at the IPCC give us the science, and now we as diplomats and negotiators and leaders need to say, what are we going to do about it to address these challenges?
Mr. Muqsit, what are some of the recommendations, specifically when we're talking about conflict areas in the region that lack the infrastructure to withstand climate change. What are some of the recommendations, some of the science that you are giving to negotiators?
Thank you very much already for the organizers for inviting IPCC. I am honored to be with you. And as it was already said, the IPCC is assisting research, science. We are not doing science. And this is, we are just providing voice of climate change science. And what you highlight already, I think each report, each cycle of IPCC is concluded by a sort of plenary mixing government and scientists. And we have a sort of summary for policymaker. And this is a sort of belonging to scientists and also to governments. And exactly connected what have been said by Your Excellency is that no place in the world is, apart, far from the impact of climate change. We have Libya, of course, but we have fires. We have many places in the world facing extreme event in climate change. And no country, no region is, far from the problem. And this is why really IPCC is really keen to provide exact meaning, because I can start by the first key messages from IPCC. Climate change is a global challenge and a threat to the health of the planet and humanity. It affects all countries and every part of our globe. Now, the last sensitivity report from our sixth cycle is coming with 3 components. The first one is the warning, and this is exactly the warning we have.
In Libya?
Yes, like in Libya.
Okay.
But we have the hope. The hope is that there are still possibilities to allow any region, any country, even vulnerable, with some possibilities, some option to tackle climate change. Because there is a possibility to reduce emission, to still stay in the track of 1.5, to stay in the track of Paris Agreement. And this, it is not only to achieve Paris Agreement, because our last report said that there is a new concept of climate resilient development. I can explain. For example, by asking countries to reduce emission, introduce renewables, undertaking energy efficiency, they are not only limiting and reducing emission, they are also improving quality of life. You can take a big city like New York. If you reduce emission, you are also, providing good air, and we are improving the health and so on. And this is climate resilient development. The hope also is also connected to some challenges. So warning, hope, and also challenges. And this is the challenges that we should face, and this is what it starts by world collaboration. The matter of climate change is it not a matter of one country, it is for all. And not only it is not only a matter of government, it is also all the actors, stakeholders, private sector, and everybody should, be motivated to undertake all the action. Every degree of anomaly of temperature matters. Every action matters. And every strategy matters if you want to stay in the track of Paris Agreement and to ensure that some countries, some regions like Ireland,
Yes.
still continue to live in proper situation.
Thank you. Ambassador Al-Suwaidi, we reported, my colleague Jack Dutton reported in July that the UAE is urging the fossil fuel sector to step up its game to deliver a low carbon energy system. What agreements do you anticipate to see at COP28 involving the fossil fuel industry?
Well, the climate change process is a process that goes on. that goes on throughout the year. I think that one of the things that we often think about is this COP event that happens at the end of the year. And that for us is, of course, our milestone in terms of what we can deliver. But we've been working throughout the year, working with industry, working with different sectors to try to see how they can come forward to address the emissions problem that we have. We know that to reach 1.5 degrees, we need to get a 43% emissions reductions. That's 22 gigatons of CO2 that we need to remove from the atmosphere. So we've been working across industry to see how we can get those gains. There are sectors that are just difficult, and we need to have practical conversations about how we do that. We've been engaging with the fossil fuel industry, something that hasn't really been happening before. What's different is that we're saying we can't solve these problems without engaging with those people who have the technical know-how, the knowledge, and the ability to make the difference that will get us the gains that will help us to get there. And what's important when it comes to energy is that we need to have a really frank conversation about how we do this. We are developing countries in the Middle East. There are developing countries around the world that need to be able to grow and grow their economies. That, by the way, is also true of the developed world, where we're seeing that there are backtracking on their energy transformation. We need to make sure that we get that development track continued, that we allow people to leapfrog or transition to this new energy future. And that's why one of the things that we've been focused around is how we fast-track the energy transition. How do we decarbonize the energy system that we have today? Because we know that we can't switch it off in an instant. We need to decarbonize the system we have today. But importantly, we need to build up the future energy system that we want. So that's why we're hoping to we're calling on partners to give us a tripling of renewable energy, doubling of hydrogen, doubling of energy efficiency, and ensuring that we are doing everything we can to reduce the emissions and build up the energy system of the future so that we're talking about what we're giving people rather than talking about what we're taking away from people. We want to change the narrative. We want to make it about how is there an opportunity there to create new jobs, to create new energy system, and allow people to make the choices, the better choices for the clean energy future that we want to get to.
But do you expect these to be in form of mandatory commitments from these companies when they meet at COP28 to in line with the Paris Agreement? Are we going to see official commitments from these companies?
We're working very, very hard with industry. We believe that they need to step up. They need to come forward with whatever commitments we can get out of them, whatever. But I think that the important thing is how do we help these industries to see a future in this process? How do we help governments to understand that this transition is happening? You know, in the UAE, most people were really surprised when 20 years ago we said that we wanted to develop a renewable energy company. Lots of people were like, why would the UAE, one of the largest fossil fuel producers in the world, want to have a renewable energy company? And we created Masdar. Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, our COP president, was the founder and chairman under the leadership of our government. And today, Masdar is one of the largest renewable energy investors in the world. When we wanted to host IRENA, an international renewable energy agency, people were like, why would you want to do that? Today, IRENA is one of the largest renewable energy organizations making a difference for renewables in the world. And that's because our government has said that we see that there is a future technology, a future type of energy. We provide responsibly one type of energy today, and we want to be part of that, providing that future energy, and we want to invest in it, and we see an opportunity in it. We see that there's an opportunity to create new jobs, to diversify our economy. Today, the UAE's economy is 70% non-oil and gas. We need to be thinking about how this is a chance to transform our energy system, and that's good for everybody. And that means that we need to do that. We need to have industry, we need to have academics, we need to have business, we need to have civil society and NGOs and indigenous people and everybody coming together to say, how can we all collectively make the changes that we need to do? And that's going to be about a diversity of approach. For each country, for each industry, for each sector, there's going to be a diverse approach, and we need them to tell us how they can step up. We've said to them they need to address the emissions, and that's what we always come back to when we talk about this. What is our goal? Our goal is to achieve 1.5 degrees or less than 1.5 degrees global temperature rise. To do that, we need an emissions reduction. We need that 22 gigatons of carbon out the atmosphere. Industry, governments, everybody come to COP28 and tell us, how are you going to get to this goal and how are we going to achieve that? And we think if we bring everybody together, we can do that.
So you think that goal is achievable?
100%, I think that it's achievable.
You've also said you want rich nations to make good on their promise to provide 100 billion in climate financing annually to developing nations. What's the UAE doing to mobilize and galvanize this initiative?
You've really hit the nail on the head, if you will. Consistently, as we've gone around the world talking to people, the main challenge is finance. The main challenge is finance. And developed country partners who have a historical responsibility made a pledge years ago to deliver 100 billion in annual investment. And for trust in the process, we've said that they need to come forward and show us clearly this year, and even though it's very late, how are they going to deliver that 100 billion? And I will say that we already feel that that's been a success, because when we started that conversation at the beginning of the year, nobody wanted to talk about that. We've worked with the German and Canadian government, and now in the conversations that we're having, those developed country partners are saying to us that they think that by the end of the year, they can clearly show us how they can deliver 100 billion. So that's from the hard work that we've put in. But we need to move from hundreds of billions to trillions of dollars. Some of the estimates are like $2 to $4 trillion in an annual investment that we need to get to. We need to mobilize that through concessional finance. So that's how we transform the multilateral development banks, the international financial institutions. What is the IMF doing? What is the World Bank doing? We need to overcome the barriers that are preventing finance from getting on the ground. And then we need to use that, leverage that concessional finance to mobilize the private sector, because that's the only way that that's going to happen. And we've been spending a lot of time working on this. Again, what's really great, I think, about the UAE and the perspective that we bring, we sat in a conference room wondering, how are we going to find $2 or more trillion of investment? And our leadership said to us, and I can remember this clearly, guys, have you thought about the fact that that's a $2 to $4 trillion economy opportunity? And we need to try and change that mindset so that people understand that this is an investment opportunity, this is a market, this is a future economy that we all need to be invested in, we all need to buy into, because this is coming and we need to be part of it. And that's what I think is really important.
Are you getting good response? I'll move to Dr. Muqsid in a second, but when it comes to, there is, Assistant Barbara Leaf just said, the Middle East is one of the worst regions when it comes to regional integration. In the absence of that, and we have a far-right government in Israel that's really not prioritizing climate change. What is the regional picture ahead of COP28 when you try to incentivize these governments or others to come to the table?
I think the transformation in the region has been amazing. When we engage with governments around the region, we've seen them engaging, investing. We see investments in the UAE. Today, the UAE is one of the largest investors in renewable energy globally. We've had a zero flaring policy in the UAE since 1978. Most people overlook the action, the real world action that is happening on the ground in the Middle East today around energy efficiency, around renewables, around methane. I think that the Middle East has shown leadership. COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh is a perfect example of a Middle Eastern country stepping forward, delivering a great result. We have a loss and damage fund that will be operationalized in the UAE thanks to the leadership of the Egyptian government. We have technology advances that are happening in the Middle East. I think that our region is a region that's vibrant, that is active, and that is not just talking, is actually doing things on the ground. And I think that we see that every day.
Dr. Muqsid, we have 2 minutes. My question to you, what steps could Middle Eastern countries take to speed up the just transition? And yeah, what regional challenges do you see in confronting this crisis?
Yes, as follow-up what His Excellency said, I think, and it is coming from our really key messages, is there are, as you say, the possibility that we can halve by 2030, halve all the emission. And to do this, I think there are many activities, mainly reducing fuels, also improving energy efficiency, using renewable, have spread electrification, and all this is coming in IPCC report. Now, the other aspect which is really important is about to look to the whole world as not one region. It is exactly the possibility to share knowledge and also to include, to be inclusive, to have just transition, and also to embark in the process that is looking for how we can really invest. And money is existing. It is just a matter how we can distribute it and to go in the way that all the partners, all the actors are working together to reduce as much as possible the emission. As I said also, and to install this concept of climate resilient development, which is in parallel, working hand in hand, even sustainable development goal. And also, what is really important, and this is, we have many lessons coming from all the events like Libya and so on. It is time to install a sort of vigilance. And as you know, the vigilance is a sort of triptych. To be vigilant, you should have developed capacity to know, to have good, and this is the role for IPCC. To be vigilant, you should have the capacity to react. And to be vigilant, you have the capacity to prevent. And this is what is requested to all the countries in order to save lives and goods, and also to improve the well-being for current generation as well as the future generation. And this is, IPCC is science voice, but it is for you, negotiator, policymaker. I was happy to attend this morning. It was all about policy. Science is here, and we are providing this information because why? When you know, you became responsible. Mm-hmm. And not taking action, it is like not saving a person in danger. This is what I ask
Thank
IPCC
you.
saying.
And on that note, we can wrap up our panel. It was a very insightful conversation. Look forward to have you maybe next year and discuss what commitments we got at COP28. Thanks, Ambassador.
Thank you so much.